It's great having John introduce me because I don't have to move the mic at all. It works quite well. Thank you very much for having me. I've got to say that it's a real honor and privilege for me to be here with you. I can't tell you and many of the people in this room, friends of mine, have influenced my career, my personal thinking, where I live, how I get around. I mean, at the very basic level of my lives, you all have been incredibly influential, and I am deeply indebted for that. It certainly influenced my career at the Environmental Protection Agency. And as John noted, about 2 months ago, I decided to leave. And one of the things you do during that process is you pack up the 58 boxes of stuff and try to winnow it down to 7. And as you do that, you go through the 21 principles of smart growth and the 4 that eventually melded into 10 principles. And so it's a real opportunity to reflect on where we've been and what we've accomplished. And I think it's provided me sort of an interesting perspective on things that I'd like to share with you. And one of the things that I certainly learned from Urbanist is that where you come from, what your training is, and particularly the single discipline focus on moving traffic or building a building or any other sort of siloed discipline, ends up having a tremendous impact on how we do our work. And it got me to thinking about what is the origin of CNU and smart growth, and who are we that have put this sort of set of ideas together, and what's the implication of our backgrounds, and what influence has it had on our work? And I think it's interesting because I think in many there are similarities that run across a lot of the people who've worked on this, and that is that we're largely technicians. I have a master's of environmental management, environmental science, and environmental policy. So in a policy sense, I work on policy design, and many of you work on physical design, and we're trying to solve problems. And that has, I think, a very specific influence on the way we work and our approach to problems. And I think it's enabled us to do some really great things. For instance, I think we have excelled at articulating the problems associated with the current way we do development. We've been excellent at it. We have entire books devoted to it: Geography of Nowhere, Suburban Nation, and we've also done a great job of articulating what the alternative is. We have the regional city. We've got simple conceptual designs. We've got the smart code. We've got all kinds of diagrams that depict one neighborhood and the pods versus another neighborhood with the neighborhood reintegrated. So we've done a very good job with that. On research, we've done an excellent job of creating of linking the built environment to virtually any topic you have an interest in. Health, got it. Water, we did that several times. Traffic, we've got whole systems for you. So any topic you're interested in, equity, environment, climate, we've made those connections. So we've done a very good job sort of taking our problem-solving approach and moving to that. We've gone further than just articulating a vision for what an alternative development pattern might look like. We've specified it to the nth degree. We have pattern books, we have street design manuals, we have the smart code, we have, the smart code is interesting. As I got to page 19 and came across the full page on window muntins, I realized we had come a long way towards really specifying what good design meant. And as soon as I looked up window muntin, I cared deeply about it. We have the 5-minute walk, we have block links. We have really nailed this stuff on the design side. And we continue to do so. We think of every possible scenario and say, what's the rural version of this? What's the small town version? And I'm speaking of myself as well, because while the physical design folks were doing that, the policy design folks were doing the same thing. Getting to smart growth. These are publications out of my office at EPA. Getting to smart growth, 100 policies for smart growth implementation. And then getting to smart growth 2, another 100. We probably put out 600 policies to specify sort of how you get there and what's the policy framework that ends up supporting the physical design framework and physical design schemes that were being articulated by the folks at the Congress for the New Urbanism. And then we have the rehab ordinances, and we have the circuit breakers for affordable housing, and we've got the density bonuses and TODs and TDM and TDR. We have done a fabulous job on that, and I think it reflects really where we've come from. Surprisingly, and I don't think this really sort of fits this thesis, but I think it's not something we've done too badly, I think we paid more attention than one would expect from a bunch of technicians to message, to the importance of language, to thinking about how we're conveying the message, whether it's new urbanism or smart growth, thinking about connecting to people's values, what they really care about, why they would do this. You know, when I was speaking from EPA, I would talk all about how it's going to make your life better, and at the end it'd be like, oh, and by the way, it's good for the environment, because that wasn't necessarily the main thing that was going to get people to move. We've actually done a good job defending brand. You know, for a while, new urbanism was all about front porches, and smart growth was all about the government telling you where to live. And we fought back, because it wasn't about either one of those things. And we've done a good job, frankly, assaulting the status quo. And I think Jim Kunstler has done a better job at that than anyone. So evangelizing, we've done well. We have conferences, we've written books, we've got articles, we've done interviews. There was my mom called me very excitedly the other day because she heard me on the radio. So the message is getting out there. And we've actually got examples on the ground, great examples. We've got Winter Park, we've got Newtown, St. Charles, and incidentally, John, after Mississippi, a couple months later, we did go to Seaside and spend our honeymoon there. Maybe that's a busman's holiday, I don't know. So with all of that work, what has been achieved? And this is sort of where I found myself as I was packing my boxes. What has been achieved? And I think, first and foremost, a lot more than I ever thought would be achieved. I mean, I'm thrilled at the progress that's been made. I really thought this was tilting at windmills, but I only thought, well, I know exactly what happens if we don't work on it. Things stay the same. But this was a sort of a ridiculous prospect to imagine that you could actually turn the battleship that is development across the country. But there's been tremendous progress. We have example projects on the ground. We have much greater market acceptance among the private sector. Every conference you go to now, whether it's the private sector or the public sector, they're talking about mixed use, they're talking about compact development. It's the context for many development discussions in local government now. You come in for a zoning hearing, and the argument might be, this is smart growth. No, it's not, and they argue about what smart growth is. And someone tries to claim it's new urbanism or it's urbanism, and someone says, no, it doesn't have mixed use. And so that's tremendous progress. And we also, of course, have piecemeal policy achievements. We can point to places that have adopted form-based zoning, form-based codes. We can point to places that have changed to a fix-it-first policy on the transportation side. We can point to places like Massachusetts where they combined agencies and put it all under one rubric to try to get localities to change their zoning. But in the end analysis, I think a clear-eyed, hard-nosed view of this and where we are now is that we're losing, or we're not winning yet. If you look at the bulk of what's built today, we're a niche. We've got a little piece of the market, but most of what's being built is exactly what's been built before, and the system continues to favor exactly what's always been built, and the things that we're trying to do in this room continue to be the hardest things to do. That's the reality, I think. So we need to do something differently. We need to do things that actually change what the system favors at scale, not for our particular project, not in our particular town, but at a scale that's going to make a big difference. And the time is ripe for this. I mean, we should be very encouraged. The time is ripe in part because of all the work that you all have done over the past several years and the context that that's created for this conversation. And the time is right because of macro factors: oil security, energy security, rising gas prices, climate change, the housing market tanking, fiscal crisis. All of those put the wind at our back in some ways if we're to take advantage of that. But it requires, to capitalize on this, I think really requires a different kind of work than we have been doing to this point in time. It is not a technician's job from this point onward. I think we need to move more towards work that is much more in the style of political campaigns. Let me use climate as an example. Climate is about to be addressed at the federal level. It is currently being addressed at the state level. There are more than 800 cities that have taken climate challenge pledges at the local level. And those, however those are implemented, it's going to have an impact on. And if we're not part of those discussions, if we're not advancing solutions in those contexts in a very political way, those rules are going to be written in a way that has either a blind eye or an accidentally perverse outcome for urbanism. And then we will get to write books and add that to the list of factors, along with zoning and transportation policy and all the other policies that make urbanism hard. But we will have lost the capacity to complain about it if we don't engage in the conversation now. So let me just contrast sort of the old way, and I think this is very applicable to Smart Growth America in some ways, as well as I think the broader Smart Growth movement. But the old way of working on climate would be do the study, show the connection between the built environment and climate, issue the report, make speeches telling people about it, and hope. Hope something would happen. Hope that policymakers somewhere would be informed by this. Hope that some magical coalition would appear to drive it through the political will process. And I think we stop at that point because we're technicians. We've done the part we know how to do, and we're used to handing the answer over at that point and letting someone else take it. Well, there isn't anyone else out there to take it. Or if they have, it's been very happenstantial. The new way that I think we need to be working is show that smart growth and new urbanism helps in climate. We have to identify the relevant committees at the state level, at the national level that are actually going to be taking votes on this. We have to rally constituents in their relevant jurisdictions. We have to develop amendments and policy proposals that fit into the framework that's being discussed. We have to develop the messages. We have to do the polling. We have to hire the lobbyists. We have to run a campaign to get our ideas inserted into the rules that are going to drive development in the future. Let me give you an example, and it's one I like. Measure 37, are you familiar with that? The takings measure in Oregon. Okay, so Measure 37, big takings measure, and fast tracks, the example we just saw from Denver. Two contrasting styles of operating. The proponents of Measure 37 got a victory in Oregon, and then they wrote up a manual, how to do Measure 37 in 8 other Western states, and they shopped it around and went to replicate that methodology in 8 places because they knew the messaging, they knew the policy procedure, put it on a ballot, and they knew how to replicate that at scale. Fast tracks, lots of work on fast tracks, a great victory. We walk away and say, now what? That was great. What should we do now? Maybe we should try to replicate it. Maybe we should put the infrastructure in place that would actually allow us to replicate that in similar places. I think that would really, that's the kind of infrastructure that we need to actually make a difference at scale, because the right answer has never been enough to make change. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition for change. You have to get the right answer, and then you have to build a political coalition. How do you know this is true? Because you can see the wrong answer implemented every day through the sheer force of political will. So I would simply posit to you that we know what to do. I mean, we can have arguments about two-way couplets or one-way couplets or whatever, but in the main we know what to do, and those are very tangential conversations to implementing what we already know is better than the status quo. So what are the elements of campaign? It's having strategic targets, specific issues that you're going to go after with specific policy proposals. It could be following the money, trying to change capital budgets. It could be changing zoning. It could be amending septic rules. It could be anything, but we have to decide. We have to pick. We have to figure out what's important and go for those. We need the policy alternatives. We need the impact research, not, oh, it's connected to health, but this is the effect on the state budget. This is the number of jobs created. Your jurisdiction is going to win. We need the messaging and polling. We need the opposite. We need the political strategy. We need to build the coalitions. We need a campaign. Now, are these all the right elements that we need to be successful? Honestly, I have no idea. I am a technician. I am a technocrat. I've come from that world. I know there are people who know the answers to this, because in the same sense that there's a discipline to what we've been doing, there is a discipline to running campaigns and to the kind of action that we need to take. We have to reinvent ourselves once again to learn those techniques and take them forward. But we absolutely have to stop trying to solve political will problems with technical solutions. It's not going to work. Our main task now is building the political will. I'm deeply afraid, though, that we'll continue to do what we've always done, the things that we know and are comfortable with and are familiar with, rather than the things that need to be done. Our greatest strength, the breadth of our coalition, the number of issues that development hits, and the solutions that we're proposing that create better health outcomes, better climate outcomes, better economic outcomes, better fiscal outcomes, serves to bring a number of allies together around this issue. And we could harness that and turn it on specific political outcomes and policy outcomes that would actually make a big difference at scale. What happens, though, is, and this is the point I think we've gotten to, we rally around the fact that we know we need better communities and a better built environment, and then we fragment around the solutions right now. We run off and do health impact assessments and then try to do the SMART code and then try to fix it first at the state level, and we all sort of break back into our silos and don't come together, and we actually fracture and waste the political will that ought to come together when those issues come together. Instead, we need to come together around the need for a better environment, and we need to stay together around a focused agenda that brings political will to bear on an agenda that makes a difference at scale, that's going to change communities across the United States rather than changing them one at a time. So this is a call to action. It's a call to do the things that need to be done and to make changes not in a few communities, but in thousands. It's a call to eschew the familiar in favor of the actions that are necessary, and it's a call to political action. And that, in essence, is why I left the Environmental Protection Agency, because it was not something that I could pursue from there. That is why I went to Smart Growth America, and it's why I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.